Well, good morning and welcome back to the channel. Today, another day where I get a chance to meet someone really interesting. There's something else he's got in common with me, and that is he went to Woonona High School. And this time, I've got someone who also has a relationship with the military. So, without further ado, I'll introduce you to Craig Blanch. Hi Craig, how you going?
Good. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Interesting is probably not one of them. Thanks very much.
So is it correct that you went to Woonona High School?
Absolutely. Woonona High School.
Yeah.
I spent only to year 10, so only 4 years.
Yeah.
Either they couldn't put up with me or I couldn't put up with them.
I doubt that. And then where did your life go?
I left year 10 on the Friday. I started work on the Monday at Dwyer's,
right.
Bottom of Crown Street.
Yep.
In the spare parts division. Left there, went to Hills Truck Sales in Fairy Meadow.
Yeah. And from there you end up going to, was it BHP in those days or Australian Iron and Steel, the steel works?
BHP in those days.
BHP.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went there. I was there for about 21 years.
Yeah.
And that's where I got a lifelong hatred of shift work. Yeah, left the Steelworks in 96, I think.
Yep.
And then it was a golden handshake time when we paid off the house and all the rest of it.
You went to university.
Well, it's really strange. It's funny how the way sort of life works out. We had a tour business.
Yep.
My wife at the time and I had this tour business. And it's during that period too that we had quite a few repeat customers that came with us, some beautiful, lovely people. And one of them was Bill and Kay Mitchell. Now, Bill and Kay were in England during the Second World War, and he was in Bomber Command.
Yep.
He flew missions with Bomber Command. And Kay was a Women's Auxiliary Air Force person who put together the weather reports for the bomber crews that were extraordinarily important for the bomber crews. So that's how they met in London, and
Yep.
that was it. So, but what I didn't know at the time, of course, was that Bill himself would have a very big impact on the earlier career down the War Memorial.
For you?
For me, it was incredible. Bill and I would sit down and he'd talk about his time in England, and he talked very little about the missions that he went on.
Yeah.
We're talking about these missions at their worst. 1 in 3 people died in Bomber Command. A third of Australians that served in Bomber Command were killed. And but it wasn't until later when I started at the War Memorial. At this time was a challenging sort of period in my life, and I went to university, and everything just sort of I just went through the motions, and I was lucky enough to study overseas in Canada as well.
That's fantastic.
And even when I came out of university, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And this job came up at the War Memorial. So I started there, and it wasn't long after I started there that one of the most iconic objects at the War Memorial is the Lancaster bomber. They call it G for George.
Yeah.
And it's a very beloved part of the War Memorial. And I happened to mention this to Bill. And I said, well, come on down and we'll go and have a look at it. Little did I know, of all the aircraft in Bomber Command during the Second World War, Bill had served on that one.
On that particular one,
G for
in
George,
the War Memorial.
In the War Memorial.
Wow.
So when he came in, he happened to tell me that. So I went to my supervisor and said, this guy, he was a WAPAG, who's a wireless operator, air gunner.
Yep.
He was on George. And from that point, all of a sudden, I was with royalty. The curators came across, the historians came across to meet Bill.
Yeah.
And it's one of those very, very rare occasions where, because Bill was there, we're allowed to actually go inside the Lancaster bomber, which is really, from a curatorial, from a conservator's point of view, is a no-no, because it's an object that needs looking after. So they got the stairs and they closed off the air. It was actually before the the memorial opened the next morning, they took us in, ushered us in there, and we went up the stairs and we got into the bomber. And you see this huge plane from outside, but we go in there and it is so small inside.
Wow.
Because it's virtually all bomb bay.
Yeah.
These two big wings with the 4 giant Rolls-Royce engines on it, has a spar that goes right through the middle.
Yeah.
And you had your pilot, your co-pilot, your bomb aimer, navigator had to climb over this to get into the front of the aircraft. And Bill sat in the wireless operator's position where he had all those years ago in the Second World War. And every now and then he would just go quiet, and you could tell he was there.
Yeah.
And then he'd start telling us about things like, because it's unlined in there,
Yeah.
he kept telling us things about how incredibly cold it was, at those altitudes,
yes.
flying
Good
over
point.
Europe, and just how noisy it was. These 4 giant Rolls-Royce engines just blurring. And every now and then, when he sort of drifted into a silence, you started to understand what it was like to be in this cocoon, slow lumbering cocoon.
Yeah.
The fighter escort had long since left behind because they didn't have the range, and they were flying over countries whose sole purpose was to blow you out of the sky.
Yeah.
And he would every now and then he would mention the cold, and he never mentioned any friends. And I found out later that a lot of the time they didn't make close friends because of so many were being killed.
Yeah.
And then we come back down out of the plane, and he just walked around it for probably 15 or 20 minutes, and he would stand away in a corner, and we just let him go. And that really set the scene for me for my career in the memorial.
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd actually been close enough to relive what they would have done, and a lot of that came from his silence more than what he said. He sat in that wireless operator's like he was back there. And he told us it was incredibly cold, but there was a heater right next to the wireless operator's position. He said, my leg would get so hot, the rest of me would be freezing. But once you got over the channel and started getting into enemy territory, you'd have the German planes and what have you around, and you'd see other aircraft falling out of the sky.
Yeah. Imagine living that when you've got all these aircraft and bombs. Like, I know it's not like the TV when you see these flashes beside planes with bombs going off. Yep. You'd be just waiting for this whole thing to blow up in front of you.
Yeah, he said that the thing that really kept you sane was you were scared. You're human. You had to be scared, but you were so busy all the time.
Yeah.
The wireless operator, the navigator, they were all terribly busy. And then they drop their bombs, they take their photos, and then they'd go. But he was very sparse in detail.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff I think that he just didn't want to relive.
The pain would have been
the pain would have been
unbearable.
horrendous. And other people that I met there just reinforced that. And it was at a time when I was curating the Long Tan Cross gallery.
Yep.
Now, when you do that, it's your job to interpret how you want it to look, what you want it to say.
Now,
this area.
that's really important. The Long Tan Gallery that you were the curator for in Canberra, Australia.
Australian War Memorial, yes.
Australian War Memorial. So when you're working that out, did you personally have to go in and research a lot of the history of the Long Tan battle?
Everything from
everything
from the battle to the cross itself.
Yes.
I went to Victoria and Queensland to interview survivors of the Battle of Long Tan.
Yep.
Again, those stories there really brought it home to me what our job was down there, and that our job is, as Charles Bean did back in 1917 when he started collecting for the War Memorial originally. We can't afford to forget.
Absolutely.
Now, with the Long Tan Cross came over, and I went to these areas. I went and saw Barry McAvenue down in Victoria, who actually made the cross.
Yep.
Back in 1966.
So what is the long tan cross?
It's exactly that. It is a cross. It is a memorial cross
To the soldiers that lost their lives in Vietnam?
on the 18th of August 1966.
Yes.
In the Battle of Long Tan, on the afternoon of that day, 18 Australians were killed and 24 were wounded.
Yep.
It was the largest loss of life in a single action during the whole war. What happened was, about 3 years later, in 1969, the next rotation of 6 RAR, 6th Royal Australian
Yep.
Regiment, went there, and they decided we're going to put a memorial up to there, because it was still it was a profound loss to Australia, and particularly to a unit. So, and this was still contested ground. We didn't have control of this ground, so it was a logistical exercise to make this cross and take it in, helicopter it in. They had to go in there with defensive perimeters, to go in there with their engineers and put this cross in, and then they had a memorial service, and then they left.
Okay.
And but it's I'll tell you about one of the people that I interviewed, and Jimmy Richmond, and he was at that battle on the 18th of August 1966. And the thing about it was, as they were walking into this plantation, they didn't know.
And that was a rubber plantation.
Rubber plantation.
South Vietnam?
In Vietnam.
Yep.
Yes. And they didn't know they were about to engage a force. Now, there was 108 of them. They had no idea that there was a force of about 3,000 coming towards them. And it would have been a bit surreal thinking back later, because they could faintly hear Little Paddy in concert at Nui Dat, which was about 5 k's away. They just not long left it. So they've got this music of Little Paddy in their ears as they're going into this plantation. Alan May, who is still a friend of mine to this day, he was a forward scout, and he was the first one to see a few people.
Yeah.
And he alerted them that, okay, we've got contact here. And all hell broke loose at the same time as this monsoonal downpour started. And they just kept firing, and these people just kept coming and coming. They had no idea how many enemy were coming.
Yeah.
And it was obvious they were just about to get overrun. And there was a New Zealand, a forward observer who's the artillery. It was a New Zealand guy, Maury Stanley, who probably saved a lot of their lives. He radioed back coordinates for artillery rounds to come in. So the artillery's coming in from Nui Dat. It's coming from the Americans from the side, and there's hundreds of shells coming in. And this steel shield that they were bringing in was creeping closer and closer. As it didn't matter how many they killed, another wave would come through, and it got to the point where Maury Stanley himself was going to call in an artillery barrage upon their own position. They were that close.
Yeah.
But they'd run out of ammunition by that time, so there was helicopter resupply. They called for it desperately, but because there was artillery rounds coming in, they couldn't afford the helicopter. And in the end, one of the chopper pilots said, "I'm going in. I don't care what you say." So they resupplied them.
Yeah.
And they kept them at bay until the personnel carriers could come in and take them out.
Without that aerial support, over 100 soldiers would have been...
Without the artillery, without Maury Stanley, without the artillery.
Massacred.
Now, Maury Stanley, he's got a map there, and he's giving them the coordinates, and they're getting that close. That if he misjudged anything, he would have put an artillery round right in the middle of them. So you can imagine the thought processes going through their mind.
Yeah.
And it's pouring down raining. He's trying to wipe his map. He's doing all this sort of stuff. So all the guys are out there. They're firing as quickly as they can. And so it got to the point. Okay, the artillery rounds stopped them. Once the armoured personnel carriers came in with their 50 cal machine guns, and got all the survivors on, and they retreated, and they thought they'd got everybody. So the next morning, all through the night, artillery kept going in to really make sure that the enemy was gone. But what they didn't realise, there was two survivors left there that were wounded. One of them was Barry Custard Miller, I think they called him, and the other one was Jimmy Richmond. And Jimmy was one of the ones I interviewed in Queensland.
What did he say about being... I know he's not left behind, because no one's never left behind, but at the time they left, not knowing they're going to come back.
They knew there was...
What did he say that was like?
They knew, when they retired, they knew they were dead, that they had to leave behind, but they would come back for them. But they thought that everybody living was with them. And I asked Jim, you had to be really... It was a very emotional interview.
Yeah, would it be?
Because Jimmy relives it just about every time he closes his eyes. But what happened was, one of the artillery shells had come in a little bit close. Shrapnel had punched through his back and kept it and made a sucking wound, so it's gone into his lung. So right at that time, he pulled a pin out of a grenade and he was going to throw it. Yeah. And he's just about to go and throw it and punch. He got this in the back, and he had enough wherewithal to put the pin back in the grenade, and then he spent the night with his back in the mud to seal the sucking in this wound in his back. He said he couldn't cry out. Every time he did, he'd get the enemy would fire in his direction. The shells were still coming down from Nui Dat and from the American side to try and clear them out. So I don't know. It was even possible for him to describe what that night must have felt like a century to live through that night.
You could make a movie on his survival.
You could, and they actually made a movie. Not that he was part of it, but they did make a movie. So he's come back from that, and again it reinforced that the reason for our being down there. It's just incredible. I mean, you go to work, but it doesn't seem like work. Yeah. You get paid a wage, but it seems like a bonus rather than anything. It's just fantastic.
So you had to have all that knowledge to make sure that for people like me that visit the memorial down there, I get a good insight as to what it's like. We'll try and feel what it was like. I never can, but to feel through the photographs, through the stories. Yeah. So as a result of your role, from reading your story, you were involved in 2 books. I
was, yes.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Do you have... I've got the photographs of the books, which I'll show in the video.
Right.
Now, the book where you're standing with one of our local guys, Governor General, David Hurley, the former Governor General of Australia.
Yep, that's right.
And you had a photograph with him. Now, what book were you launching there?
That was the second book.
Okay.
So there were obviously 2 books.
Yes.
The first one was on the Victoria Cross, which is Australia's highest military award.
Yes.
And
we'll go on to that book first then.
Okay. We'll go on to that.
Yeah.
So it's really strange how things happen. In about 2017 or late 2016, I guess, I was walking down a corridor at work, and Ashley Eakins, who was the head of military history at that stage, was walking up the other way, and we, exchanged pleasantries. And just as he was passing, oh yeah, by the way, you're writing a book, and he just kept walking.
That's all he said to you.
That's all he said to me.
So that was your job.
And I saw, and I heard nothing more about it for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then I was called into the office in my section, which is military heraldry and technology.
Yeah.
Now that section deals with all the objects from buttons and bows through to tanks and aeroplanes. So, and my role was well, we all specialised in an area.
Yeah.
And I specialised in the Victoria Cross and the George Cross because that was the project I was given when I first entered that section. So I was called into the office and they said, Aaron Pegram, the historian upstairs, and you were going to be writing a book on the Victoria Cross.
That's Dr. Pegram?
Dr. Aaron Pegram.
Yes.
He wasn't at the time. He finished his PhD about halfway through that year.
Oh, well.
And extraordinarily gifted man. And anyway, so, okay. And walked away, and I knew Aaron, but not really closely.
Yeah.
So, we got together and started talking. And they didn't give us any parameters for this book, any word counts or anything like that. And so we just said, okay, we'll write the book we want to write.
Perfect.
And so, there was a lot of information already available because this was about the fourth or fifth incarnation of the War Memorial's books on the Victoria Cross.
Yeah.
But in the past, it had always been the Victoria Cross, and as an addendum, it's sort of in the back, would be on the George Cross, which is the civilian and non-military equivalent of the Victoria Cross. And we said to ourselves, these guys with the George Cross, they really deserve their own book. So we set about just concentrating on the Victoria Cross guys, which gave us a lot more scope to really delve into.
Yeah.
And that was I met some wonderful people.
Yeah.
I got to interview Ben Robert Smith and his then wife Emma.
Yeah.
And the parents of Cameron Baird, who was killed in Vietnam, in Afghanistan.
Yes.
And to sit down with them, and just talk about it all was you feel quite privileged.
Yeah.
Because there's something about the War Memorial that makes people open up. Many of the people that I interviewed or I talked to, who may bring in objects they'd like to donate, would sit down with their family around this table and we discuss things and he'd tell us things. And invariably, members of the family would say, "You never told us that. You never said that." It's almost like they have this license to open up.
Yeah.
It was like this safe space for them.
So what was the name of the book what was the title? Was it Valor or?
For Valour, Australians awarded the Victoria Cross.
That's that book?
Yes.
And the so was that Kerry Stokes?
Kerry
Stokes
Stokes,
that one?
Yeah, Kerry Stokes launched that book. And
wasn't he an owner of Channel 7?
Yep, I think he still is.
Still is?
Yeah, extraordinary man, self-made man.
And supported Ben Robert Smith.
He did.
And he still supports him to this day, which is good.
Yeah, and very, very quiet man.
Yes?
Very quiet. He doesn't like public speaking.
Okay.
So I was pretty lucky there to have him there. And there was Brendan Nelson was there.
Yeah.
Aaron and I, of course. But the really special person today was Daphne Chow. I think it was Daphne.
Yeah.
Sorry, Daphne. But she was the loveliest woman.
Now, what role was she in the whole on the book launch?
Well, she was a VIP guest, really, because her husband was killed in the Second World War in the action for which he was awarded the Victoria Cross.
Oh,
She was told on her birthday in 1944, I think, that he'd been killed. That was a great birthday present. So, and she was just the loveliest person.
Oh, she must have been fascinating to talk to.
She was.
You got me the book. Now, this is really important because I want you to show everyone the book. So here we go, the book in question.
This is the book in question.
Look at this.
This was the second book that I wrote. I was co-author for the first one. But
wow.
This is the second one.
Australians awarded the George Cross and Cross of Valour. Now, I want to know what's inside it. Show me. Yeah. Come on, this is important.
I am quite proud of this one.
All right. You can read that out for me.
That's an inscription from the Governor-General. It just says, "Craig, thank you for this splendid gift to Australia. David Hurley, Governor-General of Australia." So,
wow.
Yeah. I don't think I'll be selling this book.
It's not for sale?
Not for sale.
No. I think he's a bigger Tido than what I am. For gallantry, for all you guys out there who fought it for our country, get that book. And the name of the other book Craig? I forgot
It's
that.
For Valour.
For Valour.
Australians awarded the Victoria Cross. If you're after this book, I'm afraid you're out of luck. It's out of print and very hard to come by.
I've covered everything. I think that's tickle pink. I'm going to throw in some of those photographs in the video that you kindly sent to me. And you know what? It's been a real honour to chat to you and learn and listen to your story. It's been such a... I've got a real kick out of it.
Well,
I want to thank you very much.
thanks, Terry. I must admit, it's I'm not used to being on this side of the camera.
Yeah?
I've done a few emceeing jobs.
Yeah.
And every one was a privilege.
So, have you retired completely? I
Kind
know
of.
retire's a bad word.
Yeah.
People pick me up on that word.
I still get asked to do presentations.
Yeah.
And I do them gladly.
Yeah.
Because, I guess all that knowledge that the taxpayer paid me to get,
Yep.
I can still give out to people, because there's
That's
still
nice.
a lot of people out there that have no idea what the George Cross is or the Cross of Valour, and what these people did.
Yeah. To end up on this, I ended a video with the 4 officers down at Canberra last year. How do we stop war? Or when does a war stop?
Well, that's a question and a half, isn't it? I think people will argue that till the cows come home. I think sometimes things we don't learn the lessons of history. We don't seem to know now what winning looks like.
Yeah.
We'll go into a conflict and it just seems to be this open-ended thing where we can't say, okay, we've won now. We've done this.
It's interesting you say that about who won. And one of the officers said to me when I asked him, when does the war stop? And he says, well, when someone wins.
What does that mean?
That's it. All right. On that note.
I wish it was a nicer note.
No, that's right. So we're going to have more conflicts around the world. Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Terry.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the chat, and we'll see what happens after that. So thank you, and bye for now.